Welcome to our short Webinette on fixed assets. Let's get started. So this is a list of the objects associated with the fixed asset functionality. So basically, the things that we're going to be concerned with today really are the fixed assets themselves, the depreciation rules, and the asset classes, and then the resulting transactions. Those are the main things that we're going to touch on today. So here we are. So this is the home page. As always, we like to start at a home page that gives us some key metrics. So basically, you're going to see here fixed assets sorted by location and by fixed asset class and by status. And we're going to find out what these things mean, status and so on. And then, maybe a nice depreciation summary. In this case, this is by asset class, but you could sort this by period and see depreciation projections and things like that. And then, of course, these are more list views down here of what's going on. So my inactive fixed assets, fixed asset additions. So these are the new ones coming in that have come in, and then our retirements. So this is just a summary of those. And so out of the box, we just provide some nice starting reports and dashboards that you can just access right away and start using. And of course, they're Salesforce reports, so they're all drillable and modifiable, clonable, etc. All right, so let's just jump into a fixed asset and go into a little bit of the key data associated with that. Let's look at this one. So this is just high-level information, the highlights panel of an asset. So this is my company car. It's got an asset class. That asset class is something that we're going to drill down on in a minute to talk about what the kind of default data. But generally, when we set up master data, this is true throughout the system. When we set up master data in the system, we try to have some mechanism for templating data in so that you don't have to always be filling in all the required fields and so on. So for instance, this asset class of vehicles have a typical depreciation schedule. We use the same method all the time. So when I add a new vehicle into the system, same thing with laptops, etc. So it's a class of assets. It behaves in the same way. We can just default all the account numbers and methods and so on right in. So that's what asset class is about. We're going to drill into that in a little bit. This particular asset is active. Its original acquisition value was $8,000, and it's hasn't got any depreciation booked against it yet. But it's got a net book value of $7,000, so it's got a remaining life or end of life, remaining value of $1,000. And we'll scroll down and see that a little bit in a second. This is just from the asset itself. This is a chart of the depreciation schedule for that. So we'll come back to that. You'll see also on the right-hand panel a list of various transactions that are associated with it and audit trails that are going to help us to kind of know at all times what's going on with that asset. So we'll come back to those. But so here are some of the actual fields associated with the asset itself that give us a feel for what the asset is. So based on the asset class, vehicle, 5-year declining balance depreciation. So we said already this asset is active. These are the possible values for that field. So it could be active or inactive. It could be construction in progress. It could be new, so it's not active yet. It hasn't been put into service yet. So it could be new, waiting to be activated. It could be fully depreciated, and it can also be status of retired. So those are the statuses. Then the depreciation life in months. So in this case, the 5-year asset. So we're depreciating it over 60 months. And the depreciation method, both of those came from that asset class, 5-year. Again, we'll get to that in a second. But so that 60 months defaulted in from that asset class, and so did the depreciation method of some of the years digits, right? Which is just an accelerated method, one of the accelerated methods. And then all of the accounts that are associated with, all of the master data in the system has account numbers associated with it, so that all of the GL transactions that are generated automatically actually get you know, tagged with the right account number. So in this same way, you know, here's a fixed asset account, the accumulated depreciation account. If I dispose of it, where's it going to? You know, if I sell it, where does the value go to? An expense account for the depreciation, monthly depreciation entries. And then if we have to adjust it. So adjustments, you know, they happen based on, you know, it gets damaged, or we've added another feeder line to something, or we've enhanced it, or it's incurred some kind of loss or damage. So those types of transactions get booked to the adjustment account. And then the asset details themselves, this is where we're going to put in our description. So this happens to be Rylene's company car. It has an asset number. And then it has an asset tag number, which can be different. So a lot of people have, you know, kind of like the metal sequentially numbered asset tags that they put on an asset. So if you have that kind of situation where you've tagged them, this number is independent of the asset number. So you put in your own tag number. The item can belong to a division. It can be associated with a project as well. And it can be associated with an organizational department. None of those are required. But, you know, the bigger the organization, the more these things come in handy, right? You can also have the serial number. So this is a vehicle, and so this is the vehicle number, the VIN number of my vehicle, right? Larger ticket items tend to have serial numbers, right? Property class is really just whether it's new or used upon acquisition, right? And so, and then property type is helpful because it indicates whether this is an item that we own for our own use, or whether it's an item in a, let's say, a pool of assets that we might lease back out. So many companies that make equipment also lease that equipment as well as sell it. So that's where that's in there. And then things like the asset locations, and then you can also put a physical geolocation in, so that if you want to show the item on a map, that's helpful. So the net book value, you see that's a calculated field. Yeah, the acquisition value was 8,000. So we'll see something interesting happening with this particular asset. Maybe we devalued something in it. But so this is going to give you your depreciable amount, which is your net book value minus your salvage value, gives you depreciable amount, and that's what's going to be spread over those 60 months. And then as we track through, this is once you start depreciating this asset. Now it hasn't depreciated anything yet, so we haven't depreciated anything on this yet. But as we start tracking through, we'll see that that's going to update the current depreciation year. Our processes update those things automatically, and remaining, you know, revaluation, depreciations, all those calculations are tracked in the system automatically, so waiting to happen. Zero depreciation events have occurred yet. Okay, and then the dates associated with this are key dates. So when you purchased it, when you put it in service, the estimated end of life. Some of these are calculated by the system, but you'll want to keep track of those. When it gets retired, the next depreciation date, and so on. So as we start to depreciate this asset, we'll see those change as well. Okay, so that's a highlight there. Now, that's just key data associated with the asset itself. On the right-hand side of this page, what you'll see is the asset depreciation schedule, and just chart it out graphically. So we know this is a declining balance. I think it was some of the years. So we'll see that more depreciation is taken in the earlier years, and that declines as we go forward in time. And then as these as we actually book depreciation, then there'll be another color here, and it will turn from, you know, actual forecast depreciation to actual depreciation. Okay. Another thing that's going on here, You can see there's a list of fixed asset transactions, and there's more than 6 of them, which is the limit that we put on one page is 6. We're going to drill into that. We'll see the GL transactions associated with any fixed asset transaction. And then we have what we call a fixed asset add transaction object. So these are, this is kind of the processing transaction that kicks off the other kinds of transactions that take place. So let's actually start here and look at the various transactions that took place here. So you can see that on 4/17 there was an acquisition of this, and then at a little bit later we generated a depreciation forecast. Then we made an adjustment up, and then we made an adjustment down. This is what changed us from an $8,000, I think. So if we could drill into here and see what these were. So it went from $8,000, and there was an adjustment amount up to $9,000 for some reason. And you would have, in the real world, you would have documentation around this, like maybe I added an accessory to it, something like that, right? And then there was an adjustment down. So maybe we decided not to keep that accessory. So you can see that was for $2,000 an adjustment down. So we started out with $8,000, it went to $9,000, $2,000 adjustment down. So it's at $7,000. So that's how we ended up with the $7,000 of the beginning balance for this item. And you know, this actually didn't go through. This is an error message for this transaction. So because we can't retire an asset that hasn't been put into service yet. I mean, probably you could, but in this case, we had a rule that said you couldn't. And then we regenerated based on the new $7,000 value. Then we regenerated a new depreciation forecast. So that's really kind of an audit trail in a way of what has happened to that particular asset. Yeah. And then the system generates fixed asset transactions as well for everything. Even if it's a forecast, it's generating a fixed asset transaction. So this is the data that drives that graph up front that shows you the forecast and actual depreciation. And then also there are event audits for all the things that we just talked about. There's Audit Trail, right? That says who did these transactions and what. So if we wanted to see the acquisition, who acquired it, instead of we just drill in here and see the audit trail associated with that, and we will see that that was created by Melinda True on the 17th at 10:30 a.m. And then you would have all the detail, whether it's posted or not, the value, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the acquisition transaction in the fixed asset audit record. Let's go forward again. So we were going to look at the, let's cancel out of there. So we were looking at the asset class. So this is where the default accounts get set up and the default depreciation rule. So, you know, standard what you would expect, like the various account numbers associated with each of the activities that happen against an asset. One thing I didn't talk about in the asset itself, which you might take advantage of or not, but if you're using Salesforce assets, then we can auto-create and connect this to an asset in the Salesforce asset side of things. I don't really expect that to be that much of your situation. But again, those companies that are selling large equipment and then they might rent some large equipment, that could be a Salesforce asset. The sale of the large equipment, that would be a Salesforce asset that they track, and the life of it, they need to know where it is. They might need to do service on it, things like that. Okay, so that's the fixed asset class. Now you can create fixed assets from a number of places. So if we were just in the asset itself, we could create a new fixed asset here, right? Or from an asset, we can create, we have a couple of capabilities of doing, let me get to the list, that's the better place. So we can do a new fixed asset from here. But then in addition to that, we can go to the general, like a general ledger transaction, and create an asset from there. So So I might have done, in this case, I've done a purchase order receipt. And from that PO receipt, let's find my transactions for today. So if I've done a PO receipt, so show me very good. Let's get that expanded a little bit. So here's a computer that I have purchased from a purchase order and received today. And if I drill into that particular transaction and review it and decide that this is a transaction that I want to create an asset from, I can just do that from here. So this is a $3,000 purchase of a piece of equipment, maybe a computer, etc. And so I can just go ahead and from here use this button, this action, to create an asset from that. And it's going to ask me a minimal number of questions to get this asset set up, right? So it's going to say, hey, what's your transaction date, the accounting date, the description of this item. So I'm going to call this Rylene's travel laptop. And then what asset class does it belong to? So we would pick that out. And then what rule do we want to depreciate it from? And maybe we'll just do, you know, some straight line rule there. Okay. And then based on that, the system is going to create the asset for us, copy in all the stuff that we need to copy in. And then it's created this 1266 Rylene's travel laptop. Okay. And there it is there for a $3,000 acquisition value. And then it doesn't have a depreciation schedule yet, but we can generate that. But you'll see that there are some transactions that took place to create that. So there's the acquisition of this particular asset right there, the GL transactions and the fixed asset transactions. So all of that got created with our defaults in there. Excuse me, and then we can go in and, you know, we might give it a location. Let's put it in Mumbai. And, you know, I'll put in my serial number. Now this is a new, it would have come in as a new, so let's see where that is. So this is, so I can change that to new, right? And owned. So, you know, you can make a few, whatever adjustments that you need. You can actually ask, change the flow that created that dialogue, and you could let this ask for more information from the user at that point. We just kept it to a minimal amount of information that we're asking for, but you can prompt for more information, like some of these, any of these that you would have as required, like required data. We would be able to do that. So, so we could save this off. That's got a certain set of data associated with it now. And if we go back up to that audit trail, what we'll see is that we have some event audits then created. So based on our acquisition, we knew that we had an acquisition, but then I went in and changed that location. So that's an auditable activity. And so once I've changed that, then that's recorded who changed it and when, right? So that's part of the audit trail. And then we could go ahead and activate this. So we can make this active. So let's go ahead and make this active. And then let's give it a place in service in service date, right? So let's say it was purchased today, in service date today, and so on, and let it calculate the rest of this. I don't think we need anything else in order to make this work. Okay, so then at that point, we have enough information in here. Maybe we should put in a salvage value, yeah. So let's say that at the end of its life, it's going to be worth $100. All right, so having said all that, then what we can do from here is we could generate there you go. So you see the forecast transactions got generated. So that based on our information that we put in, it's going to depreciate $81 a month, right? And then you'll see transactions up here. So we could, at this point, you know, at any point that you change the value, you can go in and generate this remaining depreciation schedule. Let's say if you, you know, do something to extend the life, you could change the life and you can go back in and regenerate. You might add costs to it or add accessories, etc. So then you could regenerate the remaining forecast depreciation schedule. And then there's quick creation here as well. So you don't have to originate something from a GL transaction. So I should keep that in mind. So you don't have to create it out of GL transaction. You can just do a quick add here. But of course, you have to have an account that you're crediting when you're debiting the asset, right? So that's kind of the rule there. And then the other thing to keep in mind is because you already have your assets set up somewhere else, that we provide this fixed asset add transaction object. So what you're going to do when you bring the fixed assets into the system is you're going to bring them in, and you might have in your asset spreadsheet, you'll probably have the original place in service date, you'll have the original value, you'll have the accumulated depreciation already accumulated. So you'll have all that information, and you'll be able to bring that in through this add transaction object. It allows you just upload, and then it will put those in place, and then you'll be able to, you know, be off and running with your just as an upload with your book of current assets. Visit rootstock.com/demo to request a personal demo. Thank you for your time today.